It was quite a combative appearance by the former Prime Minister, wasn't it?
It really was. I mean, this was a very long appearance as well. I think it was something like 3.5 hours, which is pretty unusual by our parliamentary standards. So it was a long session. There was at least one break where Boris Johnson and the committee went off to vote for another issue, the Northern Ireland Protocol arrangements that have been brought in. So that gave them a brief moment of respite, but that was at the beginning. The rest of it was quite gruelling for all concerned and for those of us watching.
Yes, indeed, for 3.5 hours. What was his main argument that he hopes is going to convince this committee and then potentially later his fellow MPs that he didn't knowingly do the wrong thing?
Yeah, the committee have decided they're looking at two things. One is whether he knowingly misled Parliament in his responses about these gatherings. He first said that all rules and guidance was completely followed, and then he said that he'd had repeated assurances that no rules were broken. So Johnson's argument was largely about why he believed that at the time. So why he believed that gatherings to which he'd witnessed didn't breach any rules, and also the conversations that he'd had with his advisors, and why he used the phrase repeated assurances. Obviously, what the committee were probing was whether that stood up to scrutiny, basically.
And in some instances it really didn't, because at one of the gatherings his wife and his interior designer were there, so hard to believe that that was a work-only function.
Yeah, I mean, Johnson's defence about that one, this is the notorious birthday party gathering, which is the one that the Metropolitan Police actually fined him for. His argument is still that was work. They didn't even eat the cake. No one sang happy birthday for him. But this kind of goes to the heart of the problem for him, that a lot of people have already made their minds up about this. They've seen pictures, they've heard the accounts from people, and even those sorts of excuses, for many members of the public, it just doesn't fly, and therefore they don't really believe why he was saying that no rules were broken. But on the other side, Johnson's supporters are still, very much of the same position, that actually what was going on was fair enough, and his responses were what he believed at the time, and therefore it would be wrong for the committee to find that he misled Parliament. So I'm not sure how much the session really would have changed a lot of people's minds, but it definitely was a lot of light as well as some heat.
Yes, indeed, and from his own party as well. So it wasn't just a partisan sort of attack. There were some of his own party really having a go at him.
Yes, and I think those were some of the most testy exchanges. One MP, Alberto Costo, is a former lawyer who worked in government and took a very legal approach to his questioning of Boris Johnson about what Johnson knew at the time and why he gave these assurances. And then Charles Walker, another Conservative MP, particularly probed Boris Johnson on the fact that some of Johnson's supporters have impugned the committee, Jacob Rees-Mogg has referred to it as a kangaroo court. That is something that parliamentarians take very seriously. This is Parliament's only way of holding people to account for the honesty that they bring to parliamentary proceedings. So there were some very, very testy exchanges towards the end there about whether or not Johnson really believed that this was a fair process and would abide by its recommendations.
Catherine, explain to us now what happens. The committee will make its recommendations, but I noticed Rishi Sunak said that all Tory MPs will have a free vote over his fate. So will they recommend and then a vote be taken by the House of Commons?
Yes, that's exactly right. This process is for the committee to be able to make a recommendation to the whole House, both about whether he committed a contempt, which might not be that he deliberately misled Parliament. They might decide that he recklessly misled Parliament. Again, a lot of debate about that. And then also about what sanctions that could be. And it could be an apology to the House, or it could be several days of suspension. If it's more than 10 days, that triggers a process that could lead Boris Johnson to facing a recall petition from his own constituents and then a by-election. But we wait to see whether the committee need to take more evidence. We don't know the exact timetable for when they're going to make their recommendation, but I think we're into a matter of weeks rather than many, many more months, because this has been going on for a long time now.